Hello and welcome to The Big Picture. Team Anna has been disbanded as a precursor to forming an alternative political outfit. Meanwhile, Lal Krishna Advani has said in so many words that the two major political parties, his own BJP and the Congress, will not be in a position to head a government in 2014. Anna Hazare and his followers, or whoever is remaining with him, are targeting the 2014 general elections. Their argument is that the present political forces have failed to deliver in a truly democratic manner. Periodically, this country has seen and heard talk of an alternative political force being formed, different from the existing forces. Though Janata Party in 1977 and Janata Dal to some extent in 1989 were seen as part of such experiments, they disintegrated sooner than one expected them to. Now, can what started as a movement against corruption morph successfully into an alternative political force? Will we see this political alternative emerge as a strong contender in 2014? Or will Advani's prediction that a non-Congress, non-BJP force will emerge from among the regional parties like in 1996 come true? More importantly, is India looking for a political alternative? And if so, what shape it will take? We will discuss all this today with an interesting panel of guests I have with me here. Devinder Sharma, founder member of India Against Corruption. Dilip Cherian, an image consultant and a keen political observer. And Ajay Bose, a senior journalist and author who has been witnessing the Indian political scene for decades. Welcome to all of you. Let me go to Devinder Sharma first. Devinder, you have been part of India Against Corruption. You're one of the founder members. You're one of the more low-key members, I should say. But today's announcement that that India Against Corruption Team Anna has been disbanded, is it a precursor to the formation of a political party?
Well, I think you said it right, and the idea basically is that this team has done what it was supposed to do. And now we need a different kind of people, different set of people with a different kind of approach and strategies and thinking to really frame the strategies for getting into the political process. So I think both the roles being different, what Anna ji has done is to disband this committee, which of course we have been discussing for quite some time. And in the days to come, we will have another committee which will be more broad-based. We'll have people from different movements also coming in, people's movements and so on, also joining in, and that will be a different kind of a group that will try to formulate as to what should be the way ahead.
See, yeah, in your resolution the other day, which was passed by the India Against Corruption, you talk of this move to form a political alternative is not about capturing power, but about changing the nature of state power. It's a very ambitious agenda.
Well, I think we have been quite some time, we have been thinking that, capturing political power is one part of the entire process, but more important is, the radical reforms that needs to be brought in. Because if you see globally as well as nationally, the kind of economic thinking that has gone through all these years has been, widened the gulf between the rich and the poor, and it has created more inequality, more hunger, more poverty, even though Planning Commission tries to show us that poverty has come down, but in reality we know, and this is not only happening in India, this is happening globally. And so we know in 2007 we had the world food crisis, and now in 2009 we had the economic crisis, economic collapse that we call it, or economic meltdown, and again we see the resurgence of both the food crisis as well as economic crisis. So I think what we are trying to say is we want to bring up that kind of radical reforms so that we can bring about a all-round development in this country.
Okay, Devinder, stay on. I'll come back to you. Dilip, they have a very ambitious agenda, and this movement against corruption morphing into a political alternative. This is also not something which is new in this country. But where do you think this will be heading towards?
I'd like to look at three things. One is that, remember that Mahatma Gandhi himself felt that at the time of independence, he should disband the Congress.
Right.
So that's one. The second thematic is that I don't think this is the last of the political alternatives. It's not breaking news on Rajya Sabha to say that even Baba Ramdev hopes to launch a party
Absolutely.
sometime on the 9th. So that's thematic too. And the third is that with small numbers of people in parliament, people have created and wreaked either havoc or constructive debate, depending on how you want to call it, depending on which side of the fence you are. So I think that in terms of what they are about to do, this is the right thing to do. I'm sure that as a party, I hope they don't have ambitions of capturing power, which Devinder just said is not the agenda. So I think a party which throws up a different kind of system in people's minds itself will put pressure on everybody else. And I think if they do that, they've pretty much achieved their ambitions.
Ajay, we have seen this kind of efforts, in smaller sense in states and all. For instance, in Andhra Pradesh, Jayaprakash Narayan tried to form a party. He has formed a party, he has become a member, but not much success has been achieved. One. Second thing is what Devinder is saying. He is now talking of an economic agenda. He is talking of disparities. He is talking of all these things. I mean, is this something which a team like what Anna Hazare had will be able to achieve in the next 1.5 years or 2 years, because they're targeting 2014 elections?
Well, we have to see. But firstly, I am broadly supportive of this sort of move, because I think one of the things which disturbed me about the Anna Hazare movement was its overt hostility towards politics as such. And somehow there seemed to be, that implied a kind of anti-democratic structure. And also it was a bit utopian, because you cannot bypass...
They were called fascists.
Yeah, you cannot bypass the political system. So I think ultimately they realized that, they have to reform the system, and to do so, they will have to enter electoral politics. So that's firstly one. Secondly, I don't think it's all that difficult to be successful in a new party. I mean, we've seen many new parties come and be very successful. I mean, you have the Bahujan Samaj Party, which was nothing before, and it came up out of nowhere. You have Naveen Patnaik, who completely invented a party. You have Mamata Banerjee. There's so many instances of people coming who were nowhere before and creating new parties. So, of course, you have to take from what exists. I think they are being a little utopian about their overall ambitions. But I think it's a learning process for them. And I think it's a good thing for the country that people who are worried about the way politics is going, this very dreary, minimalist type of politics, maybe they'll put in some new energy into Indian politics.
Okay. We'll continue this discussion. Actually, is India ready for a political alternative? This is a question which we will discuss in the next segment. We'll go into a short break now. Please keep watching. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. We are discussing if India is looking for a political alternative. We are also joined by another guest, Mr. Shekhar Singh, member of the National Campaign for People's Right to Information. Welcome, Shekhar. But before coming to Shekhar, let me go back to Devinder. Devinder, it's very interesting. You have written in one of your blogs recently that, this is what has happened with the Anna's movement now. It sounds a death knell to social movements in this country. Can you explain that situation? Are you in favor of this movement becoming a political party, or are you not happy with it?
No, as I said in my blog also, what I'm trying to say is that I'm not opposed to getting into political system or a political process. That's okay. Anyone, and I think those who think they should do it, should do it. But the way this was all done, for 10 days we sat on a fast, the Team Anna sat on a fast along with Anna joining on the fourth day. And then abruptly we call it off, and then we say get into political process. Now that sends a wrong message, in my understanding, for all the social movements now. Because this was a social movement, and suddenly because the government didn't care or the government didn't respond, we want to go political. And now imagine if tomorrow Medha Patkar is sitting on a Jal Samadhi in Narmada, the government will say, okay, go on doing it, and then eventually tell her that, if you are so concerned, you better form a political party. Now that kind of arrogance is something which I'm really worried about, and this will happen to social movements all across the country, whether it's POSCO, whether it's land acquisition, whether it is BT Brinjal, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a worry which I raised in my blog, and I think I want to see that the civil society leaders start looking at it, whether it is something that they need also to be worried about, and do something.
Okay. Shekhar, very interesting what Devinder is saying. Do you see this as beginning of the death knell of social movements in this country?
No, not at all. It's not as if the government has been very benign in the past and that anything will change. My point is that the only lesson that should not be learned from this, and it is a lesson which unfortunately some people try and put across, that if you want to bring about social change, it can only be done through political parties.
Right.
That is not true.
So let me butt in here. You're saying that the decision taken by Anna Hazare, the India Against Corruption, to form a political alternative is not the right decision.
No. I think everybody is free to go to a political alternative, but the reasons some of them have given, I do not agree with. If the reasoning is this, that we are going into forming a political party because through social movements nothing can be achieved, I do not agree with this. If the reason is that, look, we don't want to take the path of social movements, which is far slower, you have to have more patience, you never get 100% of what you want, etc., that's all right, that's their decision. So the only, and I don't think, frankly, after all, there are people who have been in social movements for 60 years, 70 years in this country. Are they going to wake up now and decide, oh God, we were all fools and we should have all joined political party? So,
in fact, Medha Patkar tried to join politics. She even contested elections after all those years of struggle, but she was not successful.
But that's the other point. Just because you're a good social activist doesn't ipso facto mean because you'll be a good politician.
Right.
You might not, but there are two entirely different types of skills. Now, I have no problems with their forming a political party, but I have a problem with people thinking that we've all been wasting our time and that's the way. In fact, I would argue there are many issues in India which cannot be taken up by political parties because however good you are, finally you have to look towards the voter.
Right.
You have to take up issues which have a majority backing. Most of the important issues are such that they don't have majority backing. So you have to have social movements. One further point. All governments, Indian government being no exception, functions because of pressure. They are all reactive creatures. If we don't have movements which pressurize them, if everybody becomes a political party, then they'll have a wonderful time. Once they've beaten you in elections, for 5 years you shut up. And we do what we want to do.
He had an interesting point, but the fact is that in this country, many social movements, some of them have tried to morph into political forces.
Very few.
Some of them have. In the States, some of them have tried to do it, but they've not been successful. We are yet to see a real social movement becoming a successful political alternative in this country. So is it something in this country's DNA that these kind of movements cannot become political alternatives so easily?
I think
I'll come to you later.
The Greens in Germany are an example where they have actually morphed into a political party and it's worked. But having said that, I think what one needs to understand in India is that we are also at the cusp of political change.
Right.
There is a new demographic that's going to come into elections, and what people like and dislike, the role of the media, because suddenly India is becoming a more connected society. So I'm not sure today whether social movements, new parties, etc., will all follow the same patterns of formation and power gathering that old party structures were comfortable with. I think the roots to democracy are also probably at the cusp of change.
Do you think so, Ajay? Are we at the cusp of change at all?
Well, we are at the cusp of change, but I personally feel that I don't see social movements and political parties as mutually exclusive or hostile towards each other.
But in this case, they were hostile to each other.
No, we are. And I think it was disturbing, actually, the way a social movement was seen divorced from the political process, as if that the political class was out of civil society.
Right.
And I think that was a very dangerous trend. I personally feel that, after all, political parties, social movements can coexist quite easily, and both will influence each other. Now, what Dilip is pointing out, and I think that is really the nub of the story here, we are looking at a major political changes coming around in the next decade. Certainly, the 2014 elections itself will probably see neither of the big parties.
So here you're talking the Advani's language.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think Advani, of course, might have said this to fix Narendra Modi. But I mean, that may have been his personal agenda. But what he's also saying is the truth. The fact is that both these big parties have lost not only the ability to get a majority of their own, they do not command the respect of other smaller political parties to even lead coalitions. So we have a very interesting situation coming up. So everybody is playing. And this is what is happening.
Ajay, what you are saying is we are going back to a 1996 kind of situation.
Well, we are actually not going back. We are going forward into a completely new situation.
Dilip?
That's the point I was making. That we are all, at the moment, forced to analyze through the rearview mirror.
Absolutely.
If you actually look through the windscreen, there is a new wind blowing. And some political leaders are able to sense this. I'm not sure whether the Anna movement or the future Ramdev movement are the ones which are going to capture this. But new forces are going to, push around to see what is the mood of the electorate and what do they want. And when this new formation emerges, it's not going to be in the conventional mold. They will push and shove and change each other.
Devinder, when you people were discussing about the possibility of a political alternative, were these factors discussed that things are changing, India is we are in the cusp of change as Dilip is saying, and is it something which you're trying to catch?
Over the years, I have been part of the farmers movement, and I have seen for last 20, 30 years, many farmer outfits turning political, and almost all of them lost their deposits. Now, that was a time when it was happening, but now when today, the Anna movement and the Ramdev movement, at least when we go around, we see everyone is asking us, you are talking about bringing about a change, but where is the alternative? Right. And the response that we have got from all across the country has given us this hope that, there is, as Dilip very rightly said, that we are at that a cusp of change. And I think that is something which we realize, and this we discuss at length, and I think this is what has come forward, and that is why the need or the decision to shift to a political process now.
Okay, Shekhar, do you see this, when you work at the ground level, you meet people at the ground level, are they looking for alternatives?
See, let me put this, I agree with the point that Dilip made and other people have made, that we are changing very rapidly. But let us understand one difference between movements and political parties. Movements are usually around a single issue.
Absolutely.
While political parties have to have a whole manifesto.
Absolutely.
Now, as a result, movements can be inclusive in the way in which political parties cannot be. For example, you take the Anna movement.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow, if they start saying that, well, we have a socialist agenda, we want to decentralize, we want to be anti-capitalism, a lot of people who are supporting Anna will get out of that.
Absolutely.
You see? Now, what is the value of that in the future political process? And I think it's a point which was made just now. The value is that political parties find it very difficult on their own to figure out what is really troubling people on different issues.
Right.
Does environment have a support? Does anti-corruption have a support? It's movements and the strength and the depth of the movements which tell political parties also that, look, never mind if these people are your supporters. If you don't cater to these issues, you're not going to get support.
In fact, the Lokpal bill was hastened because of this, because of the movement.
Absolutely. And many other things. I can tell you, for example, in the RTI movement, the fact that it got widespread support in India, not just affected politics in India, but politics across the world.
Right.
I mean, the fact that the Congress party leaders went and made a statement after the last elections that the two things that helped them to come back with increased majority was RTI and NREGA.
Absolutely.
You won't believe, I've been around different countries in the world where elected presidents and prime ministers have actually been willing to listen that how if they bring in an RTI Act, would they have a better chance at passing? So what I'm saying is that therefore there is this, I quite agree, there's an interface now between movements and parties. But you see, it's not a blurring of divisions. In fact, I would argue that in the future scenario looking through the windscreen, there is greater and greater scope and role for people's movements than there has ever been before.
Dilip, so, you know, in this case, in this moment, what happened was that they, you know, if you read their documents, that what they have said, they're saying that since the government did not react to our demand for a, you know, to end corruption or Lokpal bill, we have to become a political force now. The motive behind this, how much will they be able to, you know, put this message across to the people and emerge as a political alternative?
You know, Ajoy mentioned the fact that you can create a Bahujan Samaj party, which had a motive. That
Absolutely.
motive was that there was an undertrodden lot which
Right.
needed a voice. What Shekhar is saying is exactly the same thing, that the motives and the measurements from time to time may change. You know, you have an altimeter at one time, you have a thermometer at a different time. But at this point of time, I think all parties, and the reason why the Anna movement, in a sense, and whatever party comes out of this, in a sense, is going to be different, is because across all kinds of issues, from environmentalism to language to failure in sports, corruption is a leitmotif which is repeating itself in the entire political process. So these guys have got a thermometer to measure something which every party needs to be anxious about.
Right.
So if they are able to stay on course on this and then slowly expand their manifesto from one cause to at least 2 or 3 causes, then they've got these stirrings of something.
But Ajoy, you know, the Team Anna is not something, you know, this last 10 days which they went on fast. It is not that they emerged out of it triumphantly or anything. In fact, they were completely frustrated at the end of 10 days, because of which they ended the fast and they said that, you know, we are going to now form a political, you know, out of such frustrations can political alternatives emerge?
You know,
No, let me just finish this question. You have written a book on Mayawati. You understood the Bahujan Samaj Party movement very intricately. You know, was that out of frustration?
No, not at all. I mean, that was a regular movement.
Absolutely.
And it spread across. It had a vision. It had an ideology. I don't think the Anna movement had any ideology at
Absolutely.
all. It was basically to do with a very vague issue like corruption, which everybody is concerned about, obviously, because it cuts across every class. But at the same time, it wasn't really at all trying to get civil society together, you know, on a common platform. There was no attempt at all to stitch together an alliance of different castes, different classes. So I think that they did very little work. I was also very surprised there was not even any attempt to put up mohalla committees.
Right.
I mean, I was very surprised, because if 1 year ago they created this huge buzz, you know, across the country, and particularly places like Delhi, I don't know what prevented them of putting mohalla committees in every this thing, try and check local corruption. Get these volunteers, you know, get a volunteer force going. So I think the movement wasn't going anywhere, really. And they were continually depending on the government's response.
Right.
And I think that the government, after having overreacted and paid for it,
Absolutely.
decided to ignore it. So I think there was this frustration. But overall, even out of frustration, if the Anna movement is now entering some kind of engagement in politics, engagement in a larger constituency. And I'm afraid that the media, to some extent, has kind of created a red herring. They have shown India to be just a certain section of people.
Right.
It's a much larger world
Absolutely.
out there. So I think they'll have to engage with
in
that.
fact, in all fairness, in fact, today, Anna Hazare's statement, or in his blog, he has said that we asked people in Jantar Mantar whether we should form a political alternative. They said yes, but India is not just Jantar Mantar. He seems to have understood the larger reality. Anyway, Devinder Sharma, Ajoy Bose was pointing out that you people started off something, but it did not really spread in the manner in which you could have spread in the last 1 year. Is there clarity about how to spread as a political force in this country? And do you think you will be able to be the basic question of this program, that India needs a political alternative, something like what you people are trying to project?
Well, I think we also need to understand there is a timing for everything. If India against corruption had begun, let's say 3 years back or 4 years back, I don't think the kind of movement that we have seen in this country would have happened. Now, there was a timing for it when we began with the Commonwealth Games corruption.
Absolutely. After
that, we had the 2G scam coming in, all those developments that took place, and suddenly, it emerged as a major, political voice or social voice, whatever you call it, and the media took it up. Now, there was a perfect timing for it. I think, as Dilip was saying earlier, we are at that stage when we need, or we are looking for a political change, and Team Anna, or Anna's party, whatever it will be called, has come at the right time or right place. I hope so.
But Devinder, a crucial point which Shekhar Singh made, that once you morph into a political party with a certain ideology, certain people, many people who are there in this movement may not be part of it. In fact, Justice Santosh Hegde has come out openly saying that he is not in favor of such a political movement becoming a political party.
What Shekhar has said, I think, is a different thing than what Justice Hegde has said. Now, what he is trying to say is that some people, when we come on a socialist agenda, economic agenda, some people would leave. But I'm more interested in something which is more important. After all, in a country which has 320 million people going to bed hungry, any political party which promises to remove hunger, I think, is something, some organization which is going to stay. And I think that is what I'm trying to look at it. I'm not worried about some people leaving just because their economic interests are affected. I'm more interested in all the majority of the people getting a better economic return from what all we are trying to do.
Okay, Devinder, we have completely run out of time. Anyway, anybody promising to remove poverty, this has been done long back. Garibi Hatao, if we all remember, was a slogan in 1971. No political party will say that we don't want to remove poverty. Anyway, we will see how this attempt and this experiment will proceed in the coming days and weeks and months. Thanks to all my guests. Thank you, Devinder Sharma, Shekhar Singh, Dilip Cherian, and Ajoy Bose. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture tomorrow at the same time.